Hello everyone. I can't help but think my work colleagues had set me up for this presentation. Not only is it after lunch and after Seymour, it's after Corey. And he really stole all my thunder. I was going to start off talking about how I was homeless when my parents kicked me out of home. I had a story about recruiting, how I weighed too heavy and they weighed me down, how I accepted an officer in charge spot of a position I didn't want, which I'm currently doing, and did a project that changed the life of hundreds of people. But no, Corey took all of that from me, so I won't bore you. And I also won't be offended if you're too tired after lunch not to have the standing ovation that you gave Corey as well. So I won't be personally offended about that. But look, I'm very pleased to be back at a Neighbourhood Watch conference. Neighbourhood Watch changed the direction of my policing career. I was a senior constable down at Woodridge. I'd been there for 16 years. I was very happy as a senior constable at Woodridge. They were different times. We don't like to be judged by today's standards. But there was a new initiative from the service called Volunteers of Policing, of which there are many here today. And the officer in charge, Nev, he didn't know what to do with them. So he asked me to look after them. And I didn't know what to do with them either. So we all got together and, look, there's one of my friends from those days who will well remember. And we said, let's go to a Neighbourhood Watch meeting, have a look what that's about. So I'd never been to one, and away we trottled, and it was fantastic. Conversation and a cup of tea, not an argument and a fight. So I decided, how good's this? And it did change my career. I then went into that community side of policing, and eventually I got to the crime prevention unit in Brisbane, and one thing led to another, and I got promoted to sergeant there as the state coordinator for Neighbourhood Watch. And my little running mate, Rodney Bell, who was with me during those years, he's still here at the back of the room, and I remember those times fondly with Rodney. We had a number of challenges in those days, for those that were here from 2005 to 8 that you'll well remember. We lost our sponsor, CGU, who we'd had for a long time. Again, I didn't take that personally. They just decided to withdraw at that time. Rodney and I rewrote the charter, the admin. We reduced the number of neighbourhood watches by consolidating them. We were responsible for setting up the secretariat role for the establishment of Neighbourhood Watch Australasia. We won a couple of awards along the way. We won the Minister's Award in 2007 for a project we ran, Watch Out. 2008 we won another Minister's Award for a community safety project that we ran. And although I wasn't involved with Neighbourhood Watch for 30 years, it certainly felt like it. And they were good times for me, and I look back at them fondly. And now, of course, I found myself in an office that co-shares with Neighbourhood Watch, and which is why I'm here today to give you a little presentation on a project that the service undertook to develop its own artwork called Look to the Stars. So before I go any further, I too, like the previous speakers, would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to the elders past, present and future. When we talk about artwork, it can conjure visual images in one's mind. I mean, if you think about Michelangelo and the Sistine Chapel, or Jackson Pollock and his drip paintings, or our Indigenous cave paintings, artwork is a very powerful medium to tell stories and to convey messages. And indeed, our Indigenous people have been doing that for 60,000 years, when they used to use the bark paintings or inscribe motives within the sand at corroboree to tell the stories about where to move and follow the food trail and things like that. And we didn't know as a service that we were going to undertake a project, but the Logan Indigenous Reference Group, a number of years ago, they came up with an idea that it would be good for police stations to have a plaque out front that acknowledged the traditional custodians of the land. And my friends and colleagues from Logan are here as well today. And they put the proposal together and sent it up to the Deputy Commissioner and said, we think this is a good idea, not just for Logan, but for the entire state. He agreed, and through the Cultural Engagement Unit, we took that wording to the Indigenous Reference Group that has a statewide overview and, tossed in about a few ideas about how it should look, what it should say, and we came up with some generic wording. The wording you can see on the screen in front of you, and that was the agreed wording. We put an artwork border around that from Laurie Nona, who used to be in the police service, a Torres Strait Islander man. And when we took that back to the Indigenous Reference Group and said, look, here it is, this is the final version, we're going to send this out statewide and encourage police stations to display it, we got told that that was an inappropriate border to use for an acknowledgement insofar as that it didn't reference anything for the Aboriginal people. And so we had this conversation about art and what would be appropriate. And it turns out that the use of Indigenous art is really quite complicated. Some of the things I've already briefly mentioned is that it can tell stories, sometimes secret. Some of those motives can't leave an Indigenous community. They can't be shown with numbers, letters. There's a whole raft of issues that surround the use and the reproduction of Indigenous art. So we thought, all right, well, how can we overcome this? And it was decided that the QPS could have a crack at developing its own bespoke artwork that told the story of the Queensland Police Service interactions with Indigenous communities, past, present and future. So what I'm going to explain to you in the next few minutes is how we undertook the development of the artwork, what the artwork actually means, and how we hope to use it in the future. And while I'm doing that, I would just like you all to keep in the back of your mind that the concept of diversity, which Maria spoke about earlier, Corey did as well. Hold your applause every time I mention Corey. I saw him signing shirts during lunch. I mean, Lord. The Commissioner spoke about diversity, but you all know that we live in one of the most multicultural places in the world. So just think about your own neighbourhood watch areas and what the cultural mix of your area is. It's important that organisations, departments, community groups represent the diverse matrix of your area. I think everyone knows that diversity is a good thing. If you have a diverse group or a diverse organisation such as the police, it brings in different viewpoints, different aspects, different conversations, different points of view, and it leads to better decision making and more efficient organisations. And community groups and organisations that aren't getting on board with diversity are going to get left behind. So I'd just like you to keep that in the background as I proceed and try and link that with the artwork. And just looking at this PowerPoint, I want to apologise to some of my colleagues that are sitting through this for the third time. I did produce a different PowerPoint to bring today, but guess what? All USBs look the same, so they have to sit through it again. So we'll go through it. So what we needed to do at the commencement of this project was to get together a reference group. And we did that internally. We picked Aboriginal people, Torres Strait Islander people, male, female, all ages, all ranks, aunties and uncles, and we got them together with a specialist organisation that facilitated a number of diagnostic sessions to tease out what the police service story in terms of our First Nations people were. It was done through a number of sessions, and we provided the people that conducted the diagnostic sessions with the QPS strategic directions, Robert Peel's principles of policing, and a number of strategic documents, federal ones as well, reconciliation action plans, the state government close the gap strategies, and all this feedback and conversation happened, and from that they had to interpret what they meant and come up with a concept for an artwork. So before I go any further, there's just a small 4-minute video, which is still a draft. You are the first people that'll be seeing it. Les Bullis hasn't even seen it as yet. And it's almost complete, but we intend to use this as an internal training video. We have a number of training packages called our 5 Mile training. So they're just a 5-minute video that helps to give an understanding to our people why we do things. So this is it in its draft, and it's from the reference group themselves that are talking about the development of the artwork. Thank you. If you could play the video.
It's my absolute pleasure to be able to introduce the QPS artwork named Look to the Stars. This magnificent piece of art is a visual reminder of our past, our present, and our future engagements with all Indigenous communities right throughout Queensland.
We want to be inclusive and try and form a better relationship, because if you don't have a great connection with the community that you serve, as a police officer, you're not effective. This is so in line with what we want to do, more inclusion and diversity in the police.
Galimba was approached by the Queensland Police Service to create an artwork that would represent the relationship between the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities of Queensland and the QPS. Our immediate response to this extraordinary project was, if you're going to tell this story, you've got to tell the whole story.
We talked about Sir Robert Peel's 9 principles of policing, and one of the fundamental tenets of that is police are the community and the community are the police. And certainly the First Nations people are a very important part of that community.
Being able to say that we've developed our own artwork that can be used by the service, it's a pretty special opportunity. So yeah, I was really excited and felt honoured to be invited and be a part of it.
Every strategy session that Galimba has is very different. This one was definitely a standout because it would have been impossible for us to completely understand that story without the people who contributed. There was no holding back, very honest and rankless.
It was really important that the artwork recognised the past, the present and also the future. We have to have an open conversation and we have to be honest. We have to accept what we've actually done wrong in the past, and we actually have to work out how we can actually make reparation for the future.
I think that was one of the main things, is that we listened to people's experiences and then put those into the artwork.
There was just raw honesty there. There were stories told with pure emotion. People realise historically what we're doing here. This is a legacy story that we are leaving for the generations behind us, and I think people get that, and it was treated very seriously.
When we did the session, I thought, how are you going to pull out an artwork out of what we discussed, because there are so many different stories and experiences shared.
The narrative that came about was the idea of looking up to the stars, and something that's really important to both Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures is the stories that are written in the stars, and it also has really lovely connections with the badge. That was so important because it is something that connects us.
Sitting at the heart of this story and this process was the creation of a symbol, the creation of the guiding constellation: trust, respect and relationships.
The guiding constellation is very important because it's all about that connection to your colleagues, your community. You really need that trust, that respect for it to create an atmosphere where you can actually have an open discussion about issues. To be able to take that back to my community is excessive pride.
When I see the guiding constellation above the entry of the Queensland Police Service, I just think immediately of the incredible, passionate, courageous people who came together not only to share their stories, but to create a bigger story, a wider narrative, a wider message about unity.
It's not about art, it's about truth, and the community have suffered, you know, for many, many generations, and they need their story to be told. So it's about using that artwork as an effective means of communication. It's such a tool, and it just unites people.
I was proud that here we finally had something that didn't hide the dark periods of our history, but gave us so much hope for the future.
I noticed in that in some of the scenes I had a beard. It's a look I still like, but my wife doesn't. And there were scenes where I didn't have a beard. I think that demonstrates that this didn't happen quickly. It was an 18-month process. There was lots of consultations involved, not just with that reference group, but with the Indigenous reference group, with our ethnic advisory group, the executive leadership team and other key stakeholders. So it was quite the process. They did briefly talk about the different components of the artwork, but I just might break that down a little more for everyone. So Jenna, who you saw there, she was the artist, and she uses the concept of looking to the stars. The light that reaches us tonight has taken all of eternity to get to us. Our feet are firmly planted on the ground, which is now. Everything beyond us is yesterday, and as we gaze to the stars, it's the future. So this is the narrative that she took to develop the artwork to tell the Queensland Police story. So I'm just going to break down the components now, and I'm not going to bang on about this, but I'd like you to note throughout the presentation that one of the ways we got around the issue of Aboriginal art and Torres Strait Islander art, because they have their two distinct styles and motives, they've been included and weaved throughout the entire artwork. There's some postcards on your table that you can have a closer look to. So the chevrons, they represent Torres Strait Islander motives. The more jaggery points are Torres Strait Islander, where the dots are more Aboriginal. So you can see that the stars of the round circles represent First Nations peoples' motives for stars, includes both Torres Strait Islander and Aboriginal. And now this is consistent throughout the entire painting, but I won't draw your attention to that again. So this line which sits at the bottom of the painting is called the Yesterday line. It represents the 60,000 plus years of Indigenous history in this country. A couple of things to point out here. One is that black rectangle. And now what that represents is the time in our relationship with the First Nations people that was dark. It's when the police were known as the bully men, and although we were, not me personally, but the police were operating under the laws of the day, post-colonisation, the Aboriginal Protection and Opium Act, history has shown what happened to have been wrong. The removal of Indigenous people from their community, forcing them into missions, separating them from their families, not letting them practice their culture or speak their language, was the wrong thing to do. And that's what that rectangle represents. It's a dark moment in our relationships with the First Nations people. And it needs to be acknowledged, because if you don't acknowledge the mistakes, you can't move forward from them. And when we give this presentation to the elders, many of them cry. You know, it has significant meaning to them that we're able to acknowledge that things in the past, weren't always terrific. So that's the Yesterday line, and it sits at the bottom of the artwork. The next three stars, they're bigger and they shine brighter in this artwork. And this is the Today line. So each one of these three stars is listen, learn and act. So the courage to listen, the fairness of our learning and pride in our actions. And for the police in the room, you'll notice that courage, fairness and pride is taken off our strategic plan, and they're the Commissioner's behaviour traits that he expects all members of the Queensland Police Service to display. So in essence, you could use this, as some sort of guide on how you should conduct yourself. Again, you'll see that everything that's happening today in those stars, it's connected. And you will note again a black rectangle. So if that represents today, why is there a black rectangle? Well, it's kind of future-proofing the artwork, I guess. We're going to try really hard to build good relationships and use this artwork as an engagement strategy, but we might still make mistakes as we progress as an organisation, and we want to acknowledge that. And if we do, we want to dust ourselves off and move forward. So that's the Today line, and it sits up the top of the artwork. The next part of it here is the connection pathways. And you'll see that the round circles in the middle there, they're symbolic of meeting places. And the path from yesterday to today, it's not direct. It's been different for different people, organisations, cultures, but it's important to show that it's linked. And then what sits behind there is the culture swirls. So for our First Nations people, everything that they do today is informed from yesterday. It's connected to yesterday, to that 60,000 years of history that they have, and their culture surrounds them at all time and informs their thinking. So that sits in the background of the painting. Now, the next things that appear here are 9 stars, and they represent Sir Robert Peel's 9 principles of policing. Police in the room would be very familiar with Sir Robert Peel. In 1829, he developed these 9 principles that all modern police services have based themselves on. They're taught to our recruits today as they come through the academy, and they're here as a reminder for all of us that they're as relevant today as they were in 1829 when they were first established. In the interactive version of this, when you hover the mouse over it, each one of those principles is explained. But essentially, the Commissioner touched on it this morning, it says the police are the community and the community are the police. And so that's a little reminder to the police there. And the bits that just appeared on the edge, they're the forever symbols. And what that represents is that this story, this narrative, isn't confined by the traditional boundaries of a canvas or a frame or an artwork, that the story extends beyond today and tomorrow. So that's that component there. And the next bit is the main piece of the artwork. It's what's referred to as the Central Constellation. The star that sits on the left is the Trust Star. The one on the right is the Respect Star. So if you have a trustful relationship with people and you have a respectful relationship, you end up having a meaningful relationship, and that's the main star that sits in the middle. But it's important to note that you have to have both trust and respect to have a good relationship. If one's missing, you won't have very good relationships. So they're connected or interwoven, and that makes up the entirety of the artwork. So as a standalone contemporary piece of art, it's quite striking, it's quite beautiful, but it also has all of these stories that sit behind that. And I've only just briefly touched on them. There are many more stories that sit within the artwork. And it led to, finally, the artwork being launched during Reconciliation Week this year by the Commissioner at Police Headquarters. The artwork is a digital artwork, it's not a painting. And it comes with a style guide, and it can be sliced and diced and used in over 400 different ways, and I'll give some examples of that later. But one you can see there is we've just pulled off the Central Constellation, our guiding constellation, the Queensland Police Service guiding constellation, and Sir Robert Peel's 9 principles of policing stars, and monotoned it, and that's the entrance to police headquarters. So it's a gentle reminder to staff as they enter and leave about our relationships. And so it was launched there on the front stairs of police headquarters. It was a really beautiful day. We had some dancers and a smoking ceremony, a didgeridoo player. And that car there, it's gone to Arakoon. And we put the wrap on it, the artwork wrap. It got smoked to remove the bad juju from it. And Genco drove that back to Arakoon. Now, the police cars at Arakoon are damaged quite badly all the time. And got some horrific photos that if I had my other PowerPoint presentation, you would have been aghast at the damage but nonetheless, he consulted with the elders. Now, the important part of this artwork is that it's not just an artwork, here it is. It's about the engagement, it's about the conversation, and it's about the consultation. So Genco, who's the Senior Sergeant at Arakoon, he got together with his Indigenous Mayor and Council and the elders and said, look, the service has developed this artwork. I don't know what it looked like or what it means, but I'm going down to get a car and it's got the wrap. He drove it back and he explained the artwork, just like I have here today. And a short time later, the elders at Arakoon smoked the vehicle to give it their blessings in the community. They took it to the school, let the kids walk in and on that car, and some 5 months later, there's not a scratch on it. The other new troopy is damaged, but not this one. And, so they have been using it as an engagement strategy up there. It gets driven to Cairns all the time, and there will be other cars in the future. Also, the big police boat that rattles around the Torres Strait Islander, it's getting some motors of the artwork put on it in the Torres Strait Islander colours. So that will be nice when they do their island hopping to have some conversations. I know just some people on the day. That's a giant mural with the wording of the acknowledgement. That's on police headquarters outside the canteen. That's the day that we launched it. That's Commissioner and that's Jenna Lee. She was the artist, the one that ultimately had to unpack all of those diagnostic sessions and try and put it into an artwork, the completed artwork. So there's a number of things that we're doing to try and embed this into our QPS culture. This is seen as a generational piece, just not a project and something we're going to do this year and next year. We hope to have it around for a long time. So there's an animation that I will play in a moment that explains the artwork. We have an interactive, this is interactive so that police with their cue lights at the scene can pull it out and have a conversation. At the exhibition, it was turned into a virtual reality where the stars were whizzing past everyone. 40,000 odd people visited our stand and saw it as a virtual reality. It's augmented reality where you can get your phone and hover over the artwork anywhere, a vehicle wrap, the postcard, and it hovers off the page and explains what each element of it is. There's the NAIDOC uniforms here that we've developed. This is an official police uniform that we can wear to a number of events. There'll be another 2,000 of these with matching caps next year. So a whole raft of strategies to try and embed it into our QPS internal culture. So mate, could you just play the animation? Just goes for 2 minutes.
Our past is as close as yesterday and as distant as 60,000 years, forming everything that has come before and impacting everything that is happening now. Our experiences come together, creating memories, forming crossroads and carving pathways forward, connecting our past to our present. As we follow these starlit pathways, we must remember to have the courage to listen, to strive for fairness from our learning. Only then may we have humble pride in our actions. This story extends far beyond the Queensland Police Service, beyond the job, the station, the badge and its members. 9 stars shine down, principles that guide us, supported within the backdrop of culture, traditions and customs. Shining brightest are the stars of our guiding constellation, beginning with trust, forming the foundation of our relationships. Respect through mutual understanding and deep care for each other's stories, experiences, and journeys. With this absolute trust and unwavering respect, the Queensland Police Service will work to build stronger relationships. All 3 stars cannot exist without the others. Our guiding constellation lights up the sky, illuminating our way forward to a united future. Look to the stars.
Thank you. So that's just another tool that's available to police to start the conversation. So I'm back to where I started from, the Logan acknowledgement suggestion. This is how the plaque ended up with the agreed wording through the Indigenous Reference Group. And there it is using the Central Constellation and Sir Robert Peel's 9 Principles of Policing. And it's an artwork that can cross all the different communities now, because it's not their artwork, it's not telling any of their secret stories, it's the QPS artwork that's telling our story. So what we intend to do with this plaque now is we're going to try and encourage every police station to display it, either outside their police station, perhaps frame it, put it inside the foyer, something like that. And again, it won't be tokenistic. There will be, it's almost completed, an engagement package available on our intranet site that police can just unpack. And what the expectation from the Commissioner is that the officer in charge of these stations will go out and engage the elders in their community, explain the artwork and what we hope to do with the acknowledgement plaque. They just won't be able to screw it to the outside of the wall. A lot of police do know who their elders are, so if they do, great, get them in, have the cup of tea and explain why. And for those that don't, it's a good opportunity for them to get to know who the elders are. So because it was Logan's idea, they were the first to do it. So I got a couple of little photos here from Logan. They got the local school come in and they did a dance. There's Auntie Peggy with the Commissioner. She's from the local Indigenous reference group down there, and it's their idea. And the unveiling of the plaque there. So that was a really good day. Since then, we've done police headquarters and Mount Isa. And Gordonvale is about to have a brand new police station where they'll have that acknowledgement plaque on it. And speaking of Gordonvale, they have a 5-metre mural on the outside of the building of the artwork. All new police stations and refurbished police stations will have this artwork at the core of its design, where architects will have free range to include it in a number of ways. Like I said, it can be cut and diced. You know, you could just have the connection lines put on windows, for example. There's a couple of examples here of how it can be used in action. You'll see that the bottom right rainbow there is the end part of the guiding constellation where it turns in on itself. So we've just removed that small part of it, wrapped it in the rainbow colours, and there's some of the police using it for the Pride March. So there's a draft of a set of cufflinks and a tie pin, which we did end up getting, and they're done in the NAIDOC colours, which were given out as gifts by the Commissioner during NAIDOC week. So again, it's just an example of pulling some components of the artwork out and utilising. We have a whole range of merchandise, coffee cups, water bottles, all sorts of things that have the artwork on it. I had some. The other PowerPoint would have been more engaging, but nonetheless. I gave this presentation a little while ago to police, and the feedback was, well, what does this have to do with us? Hopefully it's quite clear that what it has to do with police is, this is about starting a conversation. It's about building on relationships that we have, and not just with Indigenous communities. And that's why I'm here today talking to Neighbourhood Watch. It can be used as a conversation starter for all communities, and indeed we've done that. We presented it at the Commissioner's Iftar dinner to the Muslim faith, and whilst they're not using this artwork, they are using their artwork to start conversations. So again, we believe that an artwork is a powerful medium and one that can be used as a genuine engagement strategy. So with that, I've got the stand up, so thank you. No need to stand, honestly.